and lead us towards discovering. Sorry. Sorry about that. That was off my screen. So previously we explored the heart and its egocentric tendency and how our innermost that our soul can lead us towards discovering our true selves and really the human being that we are meant to be. So today we'll explore how the new thinking process influences our lives, opening up the possibility to overcome these tendencies. So the title of today's talk is Rosy Cross and Gnosis, the New Thinking. So to start with a little bit of housekeeping. So this session is broken in two parts. The first part is comprised of a presentation, which will be live streamed on YouTube. Then we will stop the live stream to begin the informal exchange with all of you. So again, this is a forum where we would like to hear from you, your impression, your questions and comments. So feel free to share as much as you choose to. So in order to do so, you may either raise your virtual hand by using the reaction button. Mine is at the bottom right of my screen, but it could be different from some of you. And you can also raise your hand, but that's a little bit more complicated because we have to find you in the sea of the different boxes that are open here on Zoom. So, or you can also jot your question in the chat box, and we'll be happy to either read it for you or call on you to read your question out loud. The team members for today's presentation are Gary, Nancy, Afi, and myself, Marie Rose. So as we're about to begin, I'll ask you to kindly mute your microphone to avoid any background noises. And without any further ado, Gary, please lead us through the presentation. Rosy Cross and Gnosis, the New Thinking.
Thank you. Before I begin, I'd like to ask the team if someone can keep an eye on the waiting room for latecomers. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's public talk regarding the new thinking. And just give me a second to set up here. Okay. Today we're going to look at the magical effect that physical existence has on our thinking. For it is within physical existence that we can identify the cause for the loss of our inner powers of perception. And this has resulted in what may be called ignorance. Now, we experience ignorance as a groping around in the darkness. What is the purpose of experiencing this darkness? The purpose is to find the light by reversing the line of development that brought us into the darkness. This reversal is like a voyage to the nadir, towards the starting point, a voyage that results in inner certainty. Only in absolute certainty, in recognition of the light within ourselves, is this light able to reveal itself again as the all in all. This light reveals itself to us as the divine being within us, the original soul connected with its origin, its creator. The soul is waiting for this certainty, and it truly does have to wait, because what it needs is a basis from which it can grow. Like a tree that has found the proper depth in the earth to extend its roots. Is this not our situation also? Life lets us experience the opposites, the finite, the uncertainty, conflict, pain, suffering. What is then left for us? It is what we find in our heart where for the first time, we experience the light, the gentle glow of the original soul, the glow that at the same time makes us aware of the darkness. After the heart has opened itself to the light, the head must follow. A new way of thinking becomes possible through clear understanding and true knowledge. Hermes said that the human being who arrives at insight becomes pure. In other words, the one who accepts the truth of the gnosis casts off ignorance. The 17th century Czech educator, Jan Amos Comenius, described the working of the light extensively in his book, Via Lucis, The Way of the Light. To him, the way of the light was the way of the human being. He also saw this way of the light confirmed in the Bible in the figure of John the Baptist, who, quote, came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. John 1, verses 7 through 8, end quote. Comenius wrote in his book, Via Lucis, quote, again, light is generally regarded as a radiation that spreads itself through objects and makes these visible and reveals them. Conversely, darkness is a kind of veil that surrounds and covers things. Light and darkness thus have opposite characteristics and effects. Namely, the light turns itself outward and by doing so unfolds things, opens them up, and brings them into view. On the contrary, the darkness turns itself inward, envelops things, and hides them. Therefore, from the light comes the knowledge of things, and from the darkness, the ignorance of things. End quote. Like John, we are not the light, but the light really is in us. We obscure the light when we do not know it, but when we know the light, we bear witness to it. The awakened soul is like the light, always open and directed outward. On the contrary, the personality is the being that draws everything inward to itself and feeds the darkness. Let us now take a look at the role our current thinking plays, our current thinking process plays in this interplay of light and darkness. Previously, we explored the heart. Today, we will explore how the thinking process influences our lives. As a result of losing contact with the logos, our way of thinking became totally directed toward the experimental life, thus towards self-maintenance of the personality, sometimes at the expense of others. This loss of contact created many conflicts, tensions, and misunderstandings, both within ourselves and with regard to others. The thinking faculty has developed on the basis of sensory perception. According to modern physics, reality depends upon the observer. And that conclusion poses a limitation, as we ourselves are the observers of everything. Even though everything we observe is always colored by and dependent upon our own state of consciousness, our observations are still an enormous help on our way to liberation. For example, what we see in other people is the reflection of ourselves. The question now arises, Which mirror do we use? The outer one or the inner one? When we see the divine, the soul in others, then we also see the divine, the soul reflected in ourselves. When we see the divine in nature, in our field of life, in the universe, in creation, then we also see the divine in ourselves. Therefore, our state of consciousness determines our environment, our reality. Couple of questions. How do I interact with my surroundings? What role does the ego play in this? Our thought images constantly demand our attention, keeping us busy. Images circle around us, keeping us imprisoned. The continuous attracting and repelling that characterize our lives are also a source of unrest and confusion. Those who become conscious of their duality will seek out a different mode of life and become free of these restrictions. And in order to help this come about, a new thinking is required.
You may be familiar with Madame Blavatsky, who was one of the co-founders of the Theosophical movement, the Theosophical Society. And she translated an ancient Hindu text and entitled it The Voice of the Silence. And in that we can read, the mind is the slayer of the real. And we'll go back to that in a moment. In this ongoing conversation about finding the purpose and meaning of our lives through the Gnostic path of liberation, we always return to the center, to the uttermost depths of our being, to the heart, where the divine aspect within us is stirring us and urging us on to continue seeking and searching. And we go within, and that yearning gets stronger and stronger within us due to that searching. And no matter how strong our yearning becomes, at some point we hit an impasse, we hit a wall of resistance. And this resistance is from the limitation of our own thinking. We have thoughts of doubt and confusion. We realize that so many of our thoughts are not even our own. Again, this is the limitation of our mind. So there's a great Bob Marley quote from Redemption Song, and it says, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." But how do we free our minds? Well, on the Gnostic path, we start the process of observing ourselves without judgment, of practicing what the Chinese call Wu Wei, non-reaction, of taking the ego from its dominant place in our lives and setting it in its proper place. We cooperate in self-surrender so that there is an opening for the Gnostic light to enter into us and to continuously circulate through our entire being. And this ultimately brings us to insights and to new faculties. And in this case, the new thinking faculty. And when we arrive at that place, we can join the others that have found this new thinking faculty, such as Jakob Burma, who was a mystic philosopher from the Renaissance period. And regarding this, he says, "In this light, my spirit soon saw through all things and in all things and creatures in herb and grass, and knew God, who he is, how he is, and what is his will. Or as Blake, the poet mystic from the Enlightenment period, so beautifully expressed, to see the world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. But before we can experience this expansion of our consciousness and the heightened perception of the new thinking faculty, we first have to recognize what Madame Blavatsky said in the Book of the Silence: the mind is the slayer of the real being that inner voice, the real being truth, the real being gnosis. In order for us to reach this new thinking faculty, first, we must undergo a process of deep, deep purification.
So how can this new thinking become a reality in our lives? What are the prerequisites? First of all, the insight is needed that to our truest essence, we are not our conditioned thoughts that circulate in our mind, nor are we our emotions, and that our egocentric life forms the walls with which we imprison our true self. Our true self is the eternal center of our microcosmic being. This true self is not much accessible to our waking consciousness when our mind and our heart are occupied with the theater of our ego consciousness. When this becomes the real deep understanding, we can find a new beginning, or we could say we could make a fundamental inner change. And with this, the focus of our life shifts, and we place the new soul in the forefront. So we can ask what happens on the path. On the one hand, a gradual growth of the true self, and on the other, a diminishing of egocentricity and of our egocentric ties to the world and people around us. Therefore, in order to awaken the inner other one, we need to silence or let go of the old human being. A purification of our whole being is necessary. And this cleansing, our personality, we ourselves must undertake in the here and now. And as our self-centered desires and wanting on the horizontal level more and more diminish, an inner space, an inner silence, one could say a higher dimension opens up, and then we can allow the inner circulation of divine forces arising from the heart. And the light in the heart that has become silent, even for a moment, will illuminate our thinking. And heart and head are united and no longer governed by the ego. The head sanctuary is, so to speak, bathed in the light of the heart that inspires a truly new way of thinking. Guided by the radiance of the soul in the heart, our way of thinking can become enlightened. In the book, The Voice of the Silence by Helena Blavatsky, we read, "For the mind is like a mirror, it gathers dust while it reflects. It needs the gentle breezes of soul wisdom to brush away the dust of our illusions. Seek, O beginner, to blend thy mind and soul." And to conclude our presentation, we read a passage from the book De Gloria Intacta, the Christian Mystery of Initiation of the Holy Rosicrucian for the New Era by Jan van Weykenborg. And Jan van Weykenborg, he was one of the founders of our spiritual school. And we quote, "It refers here to the unveiling, the birth of the new thinking faculty. A portion of the heavenly figure is being generated and breaks into its counterpart of the old man. And one of the most tremendous consequences of this is the manifestation of the famous first-hand knowledge. This initiation is not conferred by a teacher or an elder brother, but it requires a process of overcoming from the bottom up, an inheritance in store for every pupil. This does not mean that any help from and collaboration with third persons through all the ups and downs attending this process is precluded. But at this point, we must declare emphatically that the fundamental condition for initiation is always self-remasonry. It is in this sense that the pupil must understand the well-known words of the Sermon on the Mount: "Seek and ye shall find, and knock, and it shall be opened unto you." So this concludes our presentation. And now we would